has increased levels of gender-based violence. Probably I missed to say that in the other conversation. And I'll tell you how. In the more ASAL communities, livestock is owned by men. And it's their source of livelihood. And that's how they foot their bills. That's how they take their children to school. That's how they feed their families. It's basically their livelihood. And when they lose their livestock, stress levels rise and mental health issues, increase. And so, by just the mere fact of a man not being able to take care of his family, destabilizes the mental status of that person. And we have witnessed quite a bit of violence against, women and children. And so, you can look at it from all perspectives, be it, increased in inequalities resulting from inability to attend school, probably because of poverty that has cropped in due to loss of crop or loss of livestock, to, decrease in healthcare resulting from an inability to afford, healthcare, moving towards generally even security. We have seen that there are IDPs that are a result of climate issues. And we talked about the surging lakes. We have also talked about, fight over resources like pasture, water. Water is a serious cause of war. I remember, I think a decade ago, I read about an African state that wanted to bomb another African state because of the waters of Lake Victoria. Lake Victoria is used by, I think, a number of countries, starting from Kenya to Tanzania to Uganda to all the way down. And so there was this conversation and argument coming out of, the use and the utilization of the waters of the lake. And so one country was feeling like, if you people irrigate, if you people cut down trees, if we do not get water from here, we are actually going to unleash our arsenal. And so the global security, is going to be threatened if we do not take care of our environment. So that's how big to me, climate issues are. Thank you.
Next to you, Thandi.
Thank you so much. Really honored to be on the panel with you distinguished ladies. My absolute pleasure. There's always a challenge when you have to speak after the brilliance has come before you. And so my job becomes either a challenge or it actually becomes easy, because a lot of the things that I would want to speak about have been well articulated. I think for us, as the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, our core mandate is, first of all, to respond to disasters. We are a humanitarian organization. We are a membership organization with 190 national Red Cross societies across the globe. So I don't know which part of Africa you come from or part of the world you come from, but I believe that in your country, you are aware of a national Red Cross society. Zambia Red Cross, Sierra Leone, Mexico, think Guatemala, go all the way to Australia. You will have national Red Cross societies that are mandated by acts of parliament to be working in collaboration with their governments to respond to disasters. A bit of context for us in terms of how we see the current climate crisis manifesting in communities. Honorable, you've spoken about climate issue being a climate justice and security issue. Absolutely. in terms of internal displacements from disasters on the African continent, sub-Saharan Africa, if we look at that, just last year we were looking at about 7.4 million people that were internally displaced, not across borders of their countries, but within their own countries, because of issues of either flooding that Justice Chawatama has referred to, issues around drought and food insecurity, where communities start to leave their natural habitats and start to move into different locations in search of either more arable land, pasture for their livestock, but also better livelihoods opportunities. Displacement is not fun for anyone. So what that also comes with is a lot of challenges around issues of access to health, proper housing facilities, education for children, access to basic services as food, water. So those are some of the challenges that we see as direct impacts of the climate crisis. Beyond the displacement, we've also been dealing in Africa with a major food insecurity issue. I think between last year and today, we're counting at about, 340 million people. So speak displacement, 7.4 million. Come to food insecurity, you're looking again at about 40 million people within the Africa region that are facing food insecurity. And that is just not food and displacement. What that means is that a lot of sectors within our societies are impacted. The issue of economic development that you made reference to. So the climate crisis for us in our mandate is already a humanitarian crisis. Beyond the economy, migration, access to water, transboundary issues, when you speak about security, those are things that we're seeing manifesting already in terms of the crisis. The other most important thing, I think that another important issue that you mentioned is that of gender-based violence. We are really putting this on the radar of climate conversations because sometimes it's silent. It's a humiliating issue for women to go through, and men sometimes, that are faced with issues of, I think, pressure to provide for their families, that they tend to these social ills in terms of, I think, just coping with the mental duress that is coming with the pressure of trying to provide for families. So psychosocial issues are increasing across the continent, and that's one thing that we also are trying to make sure that in the complex conversations of economic impact, displacement, migration, climate security, and human security in general, that we keep these issues at the core of conversations. Thank you, Dr. Sheila, colleagues.
Thank you so much. All right. There are commonalities, and I guess that's what the first question shows, that there are commonalities in your perspectives. So I guess where I want to go to now are the differences, the specifics, the nuances. So when we talk about climate justice, it's a fairly new term. And when I first encountered the term, I understood it from an activist point of view. People saying, especially young people saying, you did a terrible thing. The old generation has done a terrible thing to us. You need to, it's unjust. We want justice because you've taken away our future. I didn't quite understand where the legality. And then there are also some other ones that say nature has a right to justice, and so rivers can take you to court, and trees can take you to court for, they also have rights, which I also don't understand. But I mean, I understand it at a heart level, but I don't understand how it would be framed at a legal level. But so perhaps you can help to tell us in simple ways what is climate justice.
Thank you very much, Sheila. As my sister spoke, I listened to them very carefully. I did not even think about gender-based violence. You see, all we do is see these matters come to court, and you don't really give a lot of thought as to why there's been an increase in gender-based violence at this time, especially during COVID. We also saw a high rate of divorce And yes, so really the impact, it's about time that we moved from the courtrooms and really come into the real world and appreciate what is happening to our people so that our decisions are relevant and helpful. So I would like to thank both of you. You live and learn, and I have learned. Climate justice, I quote, refers to the fair and equitable distribution of the benefits and burdens of addressing climate change. It recognizes that the impacts of climate change are not distributed equally and that the vulnerable and marginalized communities often suffer the most severe consequences despite contributing less to the problem. And that is what we have seen. The vulnerable and marginalized have not really contributed to the problem of climate change, and yet they are the ones who suffer the most. What we have seen is that there's no fairness in the distribution of wealth. There was a farmer who talked about seed, that seed being very, very expensive. Yes, and also the lack of information, access to information. All we do, or all we have seen, is that when the floods take place, the government moves in and they provide tents and a little bit of money. No, just tents and food, actually. We have not seen the real solution in the lives of these people. So maybe climate justice demands that we do that bit more, that we give it a lot of thought, that we listen to the voices of the vulnerable in our societies and let them contribute to their futures. What do they want us to do for them? Not only maybe as governments, but should somebody maybe appear before me and say that according to the Constitution, I should enjoy the right to health. But because of climate change, because of the floods that took place and other things, I'm going to sue the government. What should I do for a person such as that? I am so glad that we're having this discussion now, and I hope that as a result, the doors of the courthouses will be open to everybody and just not to the rich. But those who are vulnerable, we should really begin to understand where they're coming from and be able to do something about it.
Thank you so much. And I'll turn to you, Thandi, actually as a segue to this. So I was on a program last night with a fellow panelist from Amnesty International, and Jeff Koinange asked, what's the difference between climate refugees and climate migrants? And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And he gave an example and said, well, the refugee is understood in law that you're suffering some kind of oppression and you want refuge, and there are international instruments for which you have a right to seek refuge. But a migrant, you move because of climate change, but the law hasn't caught up with the fact that that was also a form of oppression in the sense that because you really can't go back because you would die, but hasn't caught up with it and treats them rather differently. But I guess for IFRC and your agency, when these situations happen, you would just move in with support. But then how are you helping to take forward the understanding of these different categories of people in migration issues?
It's a really brilliant question, Dr. Sheila. Absolutely correct that there are those differences in the definitions of who's a refugee and who's a migrant. And indeed, I think the law on refugee response has well advanced. I mean, from World War II, you can go back to conventions that have been developed since then. What we do as the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies in responding to the new emerging refugee situation we're seeing because of migration that's driven by climate change is that while our mandate indeed has been primarily focused on immediate response, we have now moved and shifted into a space, as you're seeing us now, more prominent in conversations and policy development on climate change. We work closely for the last 2 years, for example, with the Africa Group of Negotiators, where we are trying to ensure that the humanitarian language and the humanitarian impacts of climate change start to reflect in the Africa position when we speak about adaptation. So for us as IFRC, in terms of refugee response, we also have a partner organization called ICRC. So they tend to do a lot of work on issues of conflict response. And then where now, because the division of labor has become quite complicated, as you can imagine, because of overlapping risks. I think it would be very difficult if you think of some context where you can say, this is climate, this is conflict, this is food security, this is migration. If we look at the Lake Chad Basin, for example, where you see a lot of issues around migration happening and where response and legal instruments now have to be applied in terms of how you are addressing issues of migration and refugees. So for us, we are partnering with organizations as the International Organization on Migration, with UNHCR, with the African Union to make sure that the drivers of migration now start to talk to issues of climate change, and that conflict is not the only reason that people are leaving their countries and their homes. That conversation is obviously happening with the European Union as well, because I think you're all aware that we are constantly faced with this disheartening picture where we see our fellow brothers and sisters dying in the Mediterranean because they are trying to seek better lives, or what they believe would be a better life across the borders, not really knowing what they will find there. Those of us who've lived in several countries know exactly that sometimes what looks as greener pastures across is not really. But the desperation and the crisis on the continent is driving these issues on migration. So in terms of response and the legal terminologies, there are policies that are in development. There's the Global Compact on Migration, for example, that starts to really advocate and ensure that governments start to recognize that climate change is becoming a core driver of migration and that people will be pushed beyond their borders and seek refugee status because they simply cannot sustain their lives in certain spaces. And so that conversation is happening. We're working with governments to ensure that hopefully national laws start to also reflect and recognize that as aspects that need to be considered in legal terminologies on how we address migration and refugee statuses. And while we're doing all those legal and policy negotiations, again, our national societies remain at the core of providing response during migration. We provide mental health support. We provide basic assistance for health because, like you described, there's pregnant women that are migrating on long, treacherous journeys. There's young children, girls and boys that get exposed to sexual violence in migratory routes. There's access to things like water, basic things as water, medication, and food that our national societies tend to provide a lot of response on. So there's the immediate response we provide, and then the legal aspect on policy negotiations that we continue to engage on.
Thank you so much for that. I want to turn to you, Waziri, because you come from a community that culturally always moved around. So it wasn't migration, it was a way of life. And actually, every part of the world has some communities that were not settled, that were nomadic or in roaming. In Europe, you have the Romani, Gypsies, etc. And it was a way of life, and they were resilient in that. They would carry what they needed and find what they needed as they went, and it wasn't seen as migration. Now we seem to have lost that sense of that, and those communities really struggle. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit about your community and how they're adapting to climate change and trying to keep their way of life as pastoralist nomadic community.
Thank you, Dr. Sheila. I was actually listening to my sister from the Kenya Red Cross. And what was going around my mind is, have we all this while, been immigrants? That was the question that was running in my mind. But then again, pastoralism was a way of dealing with dry seasons. That when pasture reduces in one area, then in another area it would be better. And that time there was bigger space, and the environment was better, and the drought would not be prolonged, and therefore there wouldn't be a lot of loss of livestock, so to say. But lately, with more permanent settlements and with reduced sizes of land and with extended periods of drought, it has, pastoralism is slowly becoming unsustainable. And so this is the challenge that these communities find themselves in. So basically it is to say, I don't think it was ever described in law. Pastoralism was never really described in law. And I remember when I was in primary school, really, I was the daughter of a pastoralist. And I went into a classroom and I was taught, methods of farming. And, I was told about, these farmers that grow crops for subsistence, and those farmers that do dairy farming, and those farmers that do cash crop farming. No teacher actually told me that pastoralism was a way of farming. So I always felt like, is there anything that these people have? It took a while before even the curriculum, realized that there is a method of farming that they have actually not looked at. And so it was traditional and it worked then. But with the destruction of the environment, with reduced spaces, with less and less availability to water, this has been crumbling. And what we see now is actually an extinct, a farming method that is actually going towards extinct. And this is the reason why we are saying this conversation we are holding is about unlearning and relearning new ways of doing things. So yes, that's my perspective.
Thank you. I'm going to open up to the floor for any questions before I pose a final round of contributions from our panelists, and then we'll show a short clip to close this session. So are there any questions? There's one at the front, there's a gentleman in the middle. I think there's a microphone coming to you, but there's one at the back. Okay, perhaps you start because you have the microphone first.
Okay, so my name is James Waichoka. I represent youth and urbanism, and I'm also an environmental planner by profession, and also an air quality enthusiast. So my question will be like, being that now our cities, for example, like Nairobi, being a very large city and having a very kind of influx in population, how are we like, because right now, like we have the challenges, like the city is already polluted in terms of water, in terms of the air. So like, what should we do as we have come to this panel, yes, but what solutions do we offer for the emerging issues that we have? Because, for example, like the Nairobi River, which is already polluted, if we keep on maybe just maybe cleaning, but there are some other parts which are still polluted, then it means that we are not doing something. So I'd like to know maybe how best are we going to make our societies to be resilient. So that will be my question, and I hope I'll find
That's
out.
a great question. And it was actually what we will ask all the panelists at the end, to give us a clear action point from your perspective of building resilience, and perhaps something that we can take away and do. So just hold that and don't answer it, because it really is the last question. So maybe you.
Good afternoon. Again, I don't have a question, but I have an input. Like I said, my name is Margaret, and I work with children. And I'm very happy, first of all, this is an all-female panel, power to girls. But there's one thing that you've left out that I did not expect that you guys would forget when it comes to how climate change has affected us, sexual and reproductive health. It is a major, I think now early periods, late periods is not a new thing, because a lot is going into climate change, nutrition change, and nutrition has been changed because of issues climate. A lot, regular periods for us who didn't have late, or a miracle now because of climate change again. That is one thing that you guys forgot to mention on, that is very, very important. Awesome. I wanted to put in, again, a challenge to you to do further research. You've talked about climate and immigration, but there's another part that is left out, climate and mobility. Some of us don't have to migrate, but we have to move. And climate, we have had places in Kenya where kids are not able to go to school during certain seasons. One, because they're looking for water, or two, there's a lot of rain that they're not able to get to school. There is that, I really would want us to marry migration and more mobility to find the missing points so that we are able to come up with a conclusive solution to our issues. Justice. I was so happy when you said you could forgive debts. I have an M-Shwari debt. I'll come see you. I swear I have not paid it because of climate issues.
There are 3 questions, but let's just take the first 2 from any of the panelists that want to.
Oh, I had not finished.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry. No, it's just a comment or short. Justice, you talked about climate finance. And I was talking to a colleague another day, and we were talking about how climate finance and funding is so important to Africa, because one, we need it, 2, we are the most affected. However, it has opened a very unique or a very big loophole for corruption to take part in Africa. We are now having the biggest polluters, the industries in Africa, funding governments, and the money, we don't get the solutions that the money is meant to do. Like, we will have, let me not mention, we will have the plastic polluters, the biggest plastic polluters, sponsoring events like COP, where what we want to talk about is plastic pollution. How are those guys ever going to change? And what they're going to do is put in money into the system, but the money will go to do other government projects. However, they don't heal themselves from inside. They're not changing their behavior to help the climate. So I also think in the justice system, there's a lot that you could do in climate finance, and there's a lot of policing that should take part if you're going to benefit from climate finance and funding. Thank you.
Wow. Okay, I think Honorable Cohen wants to start, and then you could go, and then everybody will answer.
Thank you, Dr. Sheila. First of all, I would like to talk about migration and the effect it has on education. Actually, in real life, we have one county government in Kenya that supports mobile schools because of the pastoral nature of the community. Sometimes they move away from school. You know, schools a lot of time is a physical structure. So when people move away from the physical structure they actually facilitate teachers to move along with the animals. And this is Samburu County. You know, my heart melts when I think about this. Not many people have thought about, you know, making an opportunity available, you know, despite the challenges. And so really, a lot of people have seen this, and a few of us are doing something about, you know, resolving some of these challenges. So yes, they affect education in more ways, you know, than one. Then I would like to react to the young man who is an environmental planner, who talks about, so what do we do as city dwellers? Number one of the biggest issues that the city faces is garbage, you know, garbage management. And I know in our own ways, there's a lot that we can do. I see all of us peeling sweets, you know, you gobble the sweet, and then what do you do to the wrapper? You just dispose it off. I think it begins with each one of us. You can put it in your pocket, get home, put it in the dustbin so that it is managed better. That is one of the most powerful ways of getting that done. If all of us would adopt that discipline, you know, we would have gone a long way. Sometimes it takes government enforcement officers, you know, to stop people from this, if all of us would manage it better. But also, it goes to talk about our policy of garbage management. Then I would also want to talk about probably drainage systems. I have seen that when it rains, particularly in cities, it becomes messy. You know, the drainage systems are problematic. Pollution is quite a problem. And someone mentioned Nairobi River. Nairobi River suffers from people pumping dirt into the rivers. But then when I look at that, I think about what the source of the problem is. Number one is the policy. If the policy is right, so who is supposed to enforce? The problem is enforcement. So who is mandated to enforce? So actually, if we decided to follow this, there's an officer who sits in an office, probably in the National Environmental Management Authority, who is mandated to man from point A to point B of Nairobi River. Why have they not stopped this? And so it takes us to personal responsibilities. And one day when all of us face these personal responsibilities, I am sure we will live in better countries in Africa. And then lastly, yesterday we had a conversation with the governor of Nairobi City County, and he was talking about how they have started incentivizing, you know, builders, you know, investors who are doing green buildings. I think this is the direction to go. So really, these are not just conversations. It is what you take home and what you practice. The bottom line is, it starts with you and me. Thank you.
I just wanted to address the issue of climate finance. It's when I came here that I learned that there was such a thing as climate finance. And then, unfortunately, like all finances, climate finance probably does not target the vulnerable people who need it the most. And if they are going to get this finance, it will be at a cost. I know that during COVID, a lot of companies closed down because they could not afford even to pay their loans. And it was interesting to hear countries, powerful countries like America, the UK, and other places, who were talking about relief. And I do not know the extent of the relief that we enjoy here in Africa when you know, we have been hit by something like, you know, climate change. After giving the tents that I talked about and the seeds, what else do we do for these vulnerable people who are not even responsible for the situation that they find themselves in? There's got to be a lot of education around the rights to a healthy environment, and just people putting a demand on their leaders, their MPs and ministers, on, okay, so what happens now? Where do we go from here? We need to recover. We are farmers. We need to grow food. We need to educate our children. So I am happy that I am here at this time and that there has been so much to learn. And I know that, Doctor, we will be organizing programs even for judges, because the doors of the courts must be open to everybody, unlike the doors of the Radisson Blu. So we'll begin to get ready, and as even regionally, we'll begin to, as judges, we must begin to talk, and we must begin to find solutions and make meaningful decisions.
Wonderful. Thank you, thank you. I want to say something before the next round.
Yeah, I'll quickly, please remind me your name. Margaret. It's always fantastic to have challenges coming from the audience, because I think it's the only way that we're learning and interrogating the spaces that we're in. So thank you so much for your questions. So very briefly on sexual and reproductive health, a lot of learning. I was actually like, wow, I've never actually thought about that. We stress issues on gender-based violence that we're seeing really on the increase, the divorces, which also tend to be interlinked with issues of violence that we tend to focus on. So that's a whole completely new perspective that you brought to the conversation in terms of health impact from climate change. So thank you for that. In terms of climate and mobility, again, fantastic. What I also thought through when you were speaking is that 10 years ago when I lived in Kenya, we had actually worked on a program called Security in Mobility, which was focused on pastoralism and mobility as an adaptation strategy to climate change. 10 years ago. The conversation was just starting, and a few of us got together and thought, actually, exactly what the Honorable said, mobility was part of an adaptation strategy. So what have we done with that traditional indigenous system, which is a science in itself, in terms of how local communities assessed their ecosystem and thought, we've done this needs to regenerate, we move to the next place where we can have access while that's regenerating and they move around. So those lessons we shouldn't let go of. I think much as we're seeing restricted space in the pastoral communities, I think there's a lot of legal issues on land tenure now that are coming up, but we have lessons as Africa. And I think often we tend to listen to the voices that are coming from outside. But I think voices as yours that come into these spaces and challenge us in terms of where are the solutions. We've had this. This is a conversation that's already happening. Why aren't we leveraging that power of indigenous knowledge? And in terms of, I think, for us taking that conversation forward, we've already been talking with a few organizations like Wetlands, the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands. We're talking to governments on how can we capitalize on the power of African royal houses. Because as we sit in this nice city, when we step out, there's chiefdoms and kingdoms that are actually well respected by their local communities. And they are closer to protected areas as forests, rivers, that we should capitalize on that. So that's already for me, Dr. Sheila, a solution on the table that we're working on in terms of going back and capitalizing on our indigenous processes and knowledge as a science to help us advance climate solutions. On climate finance, that is a highly topical subject you raised. For us, I think as Africa, we have to consistently remind ourselves that we only have contributed 4% of greenhouse gas emissions to the destruction that we're seeing now. So the conversations on climate finance in terms of lobby on how we need to access the finances that have been committed and not yet, I think, being accessed by African countries. that lobby must continue. We shouldn't be distracted on issues of corruption, which we now need to take to a different level, I think, internally as countries, on accountability measures. I mean, young people are revolting. You can only be corrupt for so long before the gates close in on you, or the walls close in on you. We're seeing it across Africa. So I think capitalizing on the knowledge, the technology that's amongst us, and having accountability measures amongst ourselves as Africans to ensure that the monies that are meant for those that are most at risk, people that are most vulnerable and are in need of our support and response, are given equal access to facilities that you and I enjoy, because perhaps you and I are in a better privileged space and can be able to adapt to the climate, while I think living in a global or national context that's facing these challenges. I know time's running out, so I'm going to address the environmentalist, James, you said. I was actually looking to you to hear your views on as an environmentalist. How do we actually make our cities sustainable? I'm not an expert on that. From a humanitarian perspective, ours is to focus on those vulnerable communities, the slums, informal settlements, where again we find a lot of people that have either actually migrated from rural to urban areas and are finding themselves stuck in spaces where they have no job, no accommodation, no shelter, and are needing support in terms of basic social welfare for survival in the city and ensuring that they have access to those. But in terms of, I think, the broader sustainable conversations on urbanization that we're seeing, we look to your brains as well to I think, read, challenge, and provide solutions in spaces as this.
Thank you. I think 3 more questions. Oh, my goodness. Okay, let me number them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are 6. 6 questions, 1 minute each. Start there. Okay.
Thank you so much. My name is Alvin Onyango. I'm a master's student pursuing Master of Science in Development Finance. So when she mentioned climate finance, it's something that is very close to my heart. I'm standing up because I come from an area where climate change has really affected my area. That is back in the village, Nyakachi in Kisumu County. There's this deep gully erosion that is taking at in our place called Katuko Deo. This gully erosion is, in fact, I would say it's eating the soil. Sometimes when it breaks, when the soil breaks, you will think that this is a bomb blast. And you find that people have gotten accidents, people have been displaced. You find that, again, apart from that, there was a year when someone died and was found in this gully after several months. So I'm here to find a solution to my community. I'm not here just to listen and to take notes. Again, I want to challenge everyone. I have here with me my phone. I'm taking notes using my phone. We are talking about climate action. What action are you taking as an individual to mitigate the risk of climate change? So I want to leave this place from our speakers. Yes, the government can do its part, but again, they cannot get to every corner of our country. So I want to leave this place that you can help me to go and help my community. Lastly, I want to ask, how can Africa solve their own problem? Yesterday, I watched a clip by some civil society in Africa that the agenda of the climate summit is not inclusive. The issue of climate justice, the issue of climate finance, the issue of dialogue, the issue of adaptation. How can Africans themselves be on the seat, be on the table, not only always as the menu? So help me help my continent. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm glad you brought that up. That's the reason we invested in a climate action zone, because we wanted to be sure there was space for inclusion, for conversations about finance, adaptation, and all of the conversations we're having now for the challenges to be made as directly as possible. And so first you create the space and hopefully the answers emerge, because I believe the answers are hidden within us. Where there's a problem, there's always an answer, and it's somewhere within us. So there are solutions in all of those things. And in terms of what are we doing in your particular locality, we're very focused on on the Western region. We have a long-term program around the counties in the Western region. We do a lot of communication in indigenous languages. We have community partnerships. So you will be seeing Alliance for Science doing more in Kisumu, in all the counties around there. We have specific point organizations over the next year, and many of them are young people. And so we hope that when we show up, you will come and work in your locality, because that's the place to answer that question that you talked about in the soil erosion and why, who does it affect, who's contributing. That's a very specific question that we need to do it in place. So when we show up, please join and let's be part of the solution. The next question, we're going to take as many as possible. Write notes, and then you can answer them, because otherwise we'll be hit. There's even more questions there.
Good afternoon. My name is Esther, and my question was related to the environment planner, that he talked about emerging issues in areas like Nairobi, and Waziri has said that it starts with you. But the emerging issue, for example, here in Nairobi, recently we had demonstrations, and after the demonstrations, there has been reports that some people have had respiratory issues because of the substances that were released during those demonstrations. And now at this point, even in Africa, we are having a rise in military coups that are likely to lead to wars. Now, when the representative from Red Cross talked about national laws tailoring each country to climate justice, can that be actualized? That someone can come out and say that I acquired maybe a failure or a disease because of the substances that were released in any kind of wars, or because of the tear gas, and that is that a mirage, or is it something that can be actualized? Thank you.
That's an important question. I think George will answer that in some sense. That is in terms of redress, weapons of war. I think Bwana Mugando.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name, I said, is Daniel Magodu, Chairman for Society for Biotechnology Farming of Kenya. Well, I'm a farmer, and the climate change has brought a lot of challenges. My question goes direct to the justice, and I'm happy today because we have the court within us. As a farmer, I have been farming BT cotton since it came in this country, and we have been advocating for modern agricultural biotechnology because it is beneficial to farmers because of the climate change. Now my question comes. We were told in the morning there are two types of farmers: smartphone farmers and the true farmers. I'm a true farmer. You find that I, as a true farmer, I'm trying to push to get the genetically modified crop because they have got an inbuilt mechanism to protect themselves from pests, diseases, and even they have got drought traits. But you find that somebody else lashes to the court and files against my pushing to get what can help these vulnerable people who are left in the village. And at the same time, you find that the energetic people, the youth, has migrated from the rural areas to look for white-collar jobs in the town. Now, they are the smartphone owners whom I think they are rushing to court and then I'm blocked from getting the BT maize, which I expected it will produce more as the BT cotton is producing in this country. Let me end there. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a question close to our hearts. Access to new biotechnology tools and improved varieties and the legalities and regulatory frameworks that either block access or give access to some and not to others. So we'll see who can respond to that. If no one will respond, then I will get colleagues on the floor from Alliance for Science, because that's our core work. What was the next one?
Okay, my name is Rebecca Fuete. I'm a sociologist by profession. I'm an enthusiast when it comes to matters of behavior change, especially in climate change and waste management. Currently, I work in the Zero Waste Campaign project in Kenya. So my question is, currently climate change is the top theme discussion globally, and the garbage collectors are really fighting for policies to be enacted globally to fight for their rights. We are advocating for cradle to grave, to stop the cradle to grave, like the landfills, to stop, we should stop them because they're the main issues of the gases that are being produced from the wastes. And we have families, their source of living, their way of living has been that waste. They've been getting income from the waste. I was born, I got my parents generating income from the waste. My grandparents were generating income from the waste. But because of the issue of the climate change, the issue of reducing recycling, some people are getting money from that. And now my family is being rendered useless. We cannot get any other means of livelihood. And that's the means of livelihood that we knew of. And also because of the relocation of the landfills. For example, in Kisumu, the landfill was relocated, meaning these families who knew that this is their way of living, they've been displaced and their source of living has been relocated. How can we go about it, like fighting for their rights? Because they're humans. Okay, some people call them garbage collectors, but they're humans. They're using that as their source of living. They grew up knowing that we get income from this and our parents taught us we can generate income from this. How can we think of that in terms of climate change? Thank you.
Such an interesting question. I don't think I've ever encountered a question like that before. That's a good question.
Hello, everyone. My name is Enoch Kiveka. I'm an environmentalist and also a climate advocate. So I'm not asking a question. I know we have had many questions. Now it's time when I'm passing a solution. It's nice also to offer a solving concept. So I work with a number of NGOs, and I will give a good example. One, we do restoration along the Kenyan coast, mangrove. It's called Youth Power, and I'm the project lead. So we once started empowering the community. We have restored 20,000 mangroves. And it came to a point, the community owned the project. Now imagine, no one can go and touch that mangrove. I can tell you, it's like now I'm standing. You need to have fingers deep down. Yes, you can come here to talk, but real-time solution lies with that person who does not know climate action is what, telling them what they need to do. Because we are here youth. You, the hero. You see there, you are the hero. And I am getting this. If we are talking everyday problems, it becomes like we are just a cocoon of like getting it tough. We are not seeing future. Instead of all this, we are here, different youths representing different people. We can map out region, come with real-time solutions. And when we come here, we give things that are moving in terms of like, how can we do, but they are not doing. You know, we are now asked, this is the summit for now. It's time for us to rise. Yeah. Please, let's talk solutions now, kindly.
All right, thank you. Wonderful. And on that note, I will ask for responses before, I don't know what the time is, maybe one more round of questions. We will wrap up by 4:15, so 10 minutes. So first round of responses, another round of questions, wrap up. A lot of questions.
I think my reaction to what should we do as Africa, I think it's time for Africa to arise and that Africa should speak with one voice. And I don't know how many heads of state have attended the summit that is going on. The only way our voices are going to be heard is when we decide that we're going to come together and speak with one voice. And there is always strength in numbers. I think on the farmer and access to GMOs and access that people then rush to the courts to stop you from getting seed or whatever you need to farm. I have realized, spending time here, the urgency of what we are talking about, and that certain cases must be given priority. So maybe even as judiciaries, we must wake up to the fact that cases that are emerging from climate change and affecting the lives of our people, the way climate change is affecting our people, must be dealt with urgently, so that they just, it's not just one case of maybe a court saying, oh, we have 3,000 matters pending, so this is going to be number 3,001. We must agree that we have a problem and that this problem needs to be resolved, and these are issues of livelihood. Without food, we will surely die. Without food, we will not work, we will not do anything. So one of the things I'll be advocating for is that should we have matters like this come into our courts, they should be dealt with the urgency that they deserve, and that the jurisdictions that don't have environmental divisions should ensure that they have judges who are well trained and manning these courts. What was the other issue? The collecting of garbage, fighting for the rights of a livelihood.
Of the livelihood.
Yes.
And I guess that's one of those contested areas. Yes, we believe managing our waste is an issue, but you transition from one way of managing your waste to another, and then in so doing, you are taking livelihoods away from those that were in one way of managing the waste, those that were the garbage collectors, because the landfills have gone. And now you have a new set of people, the waste entrepreneurs, who are a different set of people. So I don't really know how to answer that. It's something I really think we've never reflected on with any depth. We just know the issue. Yeah.
If at the end of today there's something that I can liken it with and what kind of protection should be enjoyed, I will surely answer you. I will give it some thought. And I will exchange telephone numbers because I really feel very challenged. We have a town in Zambia as well, in Kabwe, where we are also facing a lot of challenges like that. So I'll give it some thought and I will respond accordingly. Thank you.
If I may go, thank you, Dr. Sheila, and thank you, Lady Justice, for those responses. I'll begin by that garbage particular one you try to address. There is an organization that runs a project dubbed Taka ni Mali. It's actually a partner of the Alliance for Science. And when I was listening to the young lady, actually this is an opportunity for a partnership. A partnership where that organization can reach out to those families that have been benefiting from the garbage areas so that their capacity builds, so that they are able to manage garbage in a more sophisticated way, in the better way that is being done now, so that then they can, align to the new way of doing things, so that they are not evicted and left out, as you raised. And so for you, this should be a partnership. Get hold of any of our young people here. We have a lot of interns here. I'm sure this is a discussion that can be followed up from here. Number two, the young man from rural Kisumu called Alvin Onyango, who raises the issue of gully erosion. Actually, you explained it until I could see it. I was actually scared, it's scary the way you say it. And I grew up I went to school in the 80s and 90s when we had, I think, the longest serving president of Kenya. This president is not liked for many things, but there's one thing that I think all of us, must say that he did well. And someone in the other, room said that he said he was Mukulima number one. And that just gave farming the impetus that it needed. And everybody looked at a farmer as that important person. And this was the kind of president, when they were doing, gabions, he would be there to carry the rocks, and, just block those gullies. And I think at some point we lost it. And conservation has not been our thing. And this is the reason all of us are crying. But I'll tell you how to deal with this. In the Kenyan constitution now, budgets are done from the national government, but also from the county governments. In the county governments, there's something called public participation. In the wards, they actually do real meetings with residents of those areas for them to prioritize on the issues of development that they want done for them. And if the residents of this area can go to the public participation, because actually, legally, they are put in the media, in the newspapers, and in the radio stations. If they can go there and say, what we want is for this gully, a gabion along this particular one, this is going to be done for them. And of course, to lobby the powers that be around there, I think you must be having a representative in that ward who sits in the county assembly. These people want your votes, so you go to them. 5 people go there, they are scared, let alone 10 or 15. So utilize some of these mechanisms local mechanisms that you have. Because if you let it that way, you lose the whole ward. The whole ward is going to collapse. So I think we can begin from there, but also as we look around for partnerships but some of these are really government, responsibilities. So I think I have pointed you towards, the direction which we can start. And then the rest of the partnership can really come in now and say, so now you have rehabilitated this land. How do we push it towards productivity? And then lastly, our farmer from the Society of Biotechnology of Kenya, you talk about someone having rushed to court to stop GMO. And my answer is, no one can stop an idea whose time is right. This is the time, it is the time for drought-tolerant seed. This is the time for pest-resistant seed. We have a government, like, for example, in Kenya, and I keep giving examples of Kenya because this is where we are. We're in Nairobi, Kenya. We are saying the Kenya Agricultural Livestock Research Organization has come up with so many many drought-tolerant seed. many types of, pest resistant seed. Why would someone rush to court and trash that science? All of us have our children in school to learn this science so that this science can transform us. All of us, when we have a cold, we take medicine. Why would someone rush to court and say, don't use science? Why would someone want to pull us to that time when you caught malaria and you would not go for drug? You are told you have been bewitched. Why would, it's the same thing in agriculture and seed systems and food systems. And, so we are really saying that no one can stop an idea whose time is right. And we are talking to our farmers and we are saying this is the direction we are taking because science is not evil. Science is going to improve the way we do our thing. So thank you.
All right. Would you like to answer any questions?
What do you say after that? Right. What do you say after that? No one can stop an idea when the time is right, right? So I know Madam Chair has given us quarter past as the ending. So I think a lot of the questions have been answered. I won't even go there, but we are going to be in the room. So if we want to have a one-on-one, we can always touch base. I absolutely want to end on the conversation that you've raised on being solution-focused. We cannot analyze and analyze. I think we all know where we are with the climate crisis. And I think the best we can do right now is within our expertise, really find people we can work with, find allies that can advance our ideas into actual concrete action. I'll give you an anecdote. Years ago, again, when I worked in Kenya, we came up with an idea called Ending Drought Emergencies. I worked for a particular organization, and when my colleague and I presented this idea, there was so much resistance. It's an international organization. And I couldn't understand why. We're trying to say drought shouldn't end in emergencies. Why is there resistance? So we have to also understand, I think, sometimes the context in which we're operating, where there's resistance for you to move certain ideas because there are certain interests around certain interventions. We have to, we have to interrogate our spaces. To end drought emergencies, I thought, whoa, this is going to be accepted and everyone's going to be excited. And I was told, young lady, do you want to run yourself out of a job? Are you following? I work on humanitarian response. And I was told, ending drought emergencies, I work in humanitarian affairs, I'm running myself out of a job. So we need to interrogate our spaces. And when you have that idea, and the idea is right, you run with it. That ending drought emergencies, I'll tell you now, is what forms one of the biggest resilience adaptation strategies within the Horn of Africa. If you follow Idrisi, that is led by IGAD, we managed to find allies within government, within the NGO community, people who shared the idea and saw that we really can make a change through this small idea where we start lobbying governments, development partners, communities, ensuring that communities are empowered and that projects are locally owned, which is something you spoke about as well. And that is the basis, I think, for starting to make change. That when you engage people that are impacted by issues that they relate with, they have ownership and have accountability, most often, I think we start to see change happen.
So much. Thank you so much. So I have to end here because, our high-level guests also have other panels that they're still going to go to in the summit. But I'm very, very grateful. And I thank you so much, Sandy, for ending on that note that we're looking for allies. If you follow us on Twitter or anywhere, that's our hashtag, that's our handle, @ScienceAllies. We need more allies because when we say climate action, you have a picture in your head. Somebody else has a picture on their head. It may not be the same picture because my interest is different. Your interest is different. When we say end poverty, my interest is different from your interest, depending on where I stand. So we need allies where our interests are aligned and we can move together. So please don't let this summit be the end. Let it be the beginning of a movement. And it's not a movement for just the government of Kenya to take a piece of paper to COP. It's a movement for you to get used to saying what you want, acting in the direction of a change, and making sure you're heard and making sure that you move in your direction of travel. So it's about a movement. The government is one part, and the leadership, they set priorities, but we like to think not just of Africa, of the global South. The global South, which is the global majority, is a movement. And if we find solutions for the global South, there are solutions for the world. And so let's try and do that and begin to form the partnerships that can help us get us there. So I want to thank you all so much. Please give a hand to my illustrious panel. And we will take a seat. There's a short clip because we're still introducing our Resilience Ambassador to the world. She only really started a few weeks ago. So we've made a little clip to get people to see what resilience looks like in her locality. And we'd like to share it with you. Some of you haven't seen it. And we'll keep doing that more and more so that when we say resilience, you know what we're talking about. Thank you very much.
Great. Another round of applause to Dr. Sheila and the panel. Ladies, before you take the stage, I'd like to just interest you in one photo. And then as we cue the video, we would like, Dr. Sheila, if you could present our guests with just a token of appreciation. Yeah. Great. Are we ready with the picture? Sorry? Okay, great. All right, and another picture with our superheroes. Come on, guys, come on, guys.
And jacaranda wood is really precious. And the Kamba peoples of Kenya are very well known for their handiwork and their crafts. They're the ones that make some of the best ornaments that we showcased around the country. So we're very, very proud to offer this to you, Justice. Faithfully, tirelessly, doing yourself out of a job. She's moved jobs several times. And that shows the success and that your heart is pure. We're really grateful.
Excellent. So as the ladies leave, Dr. Sheila, I'd just like to give you a chance to introduce the video. Action hero. Yeah.
All the heroes come to the rescue.
All right.
She didn't meet the height, you know. You need to Thank you. So yes, I won't say too much about the video, but as some of you have heard me say, when I met Honorable Jackie Cohen in her locality in Kajiado, she was doing extraordinary work. We were blown away. And so we sent our multimedia team to document, and we have a full-scale documentary which will come out later in the year
going season by season with the community, seeing the changes, how they coped with the drought, what the women did, so that we could follow a real narrative. But this is just a short clip to introduce her to the world. So yeah, it speaks for itself. Thank you.
My name is Jacqueline Coyne. I was bred in a rural village in Kajiado to a Maasai family. When I was growing up, rains used to come and they used to be heavy. The trend was a drought after every 5 years. But now we are talking about a 4-year-long drought. A 4-year-long drought because even when it rains, it doesn't rain enough. Kajiado predominantly is inhabited by a pastoral community that keeps livestock. Cows in Kajiado are majorly Saiwal, and then they are not drought resilient, and so they succumb very easily. And we have been trying to point them towards alternative sources of livelihood, and therefore we have seen that it's been working. There's change, there's a drift towards keeping more sheep than cows. Some of the cultural shifts that I have witnessed, one is food taboo. We've had to influence our people in eating some of the foods that initially were no-go zone. Our people did not used to eat chicken. They would say it's a bird. They would not eat vegetables. They would say they are leaves. They would not eat fish. They would say it's a snake. But we popularized fish. We popularized chicken. Now we have Maasai people keeping bees. And that initially did not happen. We now have people, in agriculture, cultivating crops. We have seen men accept women to buy a dairy cow, because initially a woman could not own a cow. But because they have seen the proceeds of dairy, and women have been gracious enough to invest the little money they get from dairy into the economies of their households, we have seen men accept that my wife should buy a cow. We helped our women form dairy cooperative societies. In some, we were able to help equip dairy milk collection centers. And through that, we made those focus points for training and capacity building. The farming communities in the world need to adapt to climate change and to shift their culture. People have to change and adapt. Otherwise, food security will be a serious challenge in the world. As a brand ambassador for Alliance for Science in Relief to Resilience, my intention is to influence communities to adapt to new farming methods, to help them deal and adapt better.
All right. Great. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. How was today? All right. Feel like you've played your part in this conversation? Yeah? And so that's our hope, to ensure that each and every one of us has their voice heard, and that you get to do to make a meaningful contribution to this conversation. So I think this will bring an end to proceedings for today. I know it's been a very long day, and our hope is that you take time as you go back to really reflect on what we've had today, but more importantly, to explore the opportunities for partnerships. The Alliance team is here on the ground, so before you leave, if there's questions you want to ask, if you want to find out how your organization can partner, the team will be here and right outside. So please make those connections before we go. And then we'll start again tomorrow at 8 in the morning, okay? Also, please do follow our social handles to get a lot more information about the sessions that are coming up, who's speaking, who's participating. I will be trying to put out as much information as possible. And a lot of people have been coming to me asking for what's next, where's the program. All that will be on the socials, okay? And what is the social media handle? At Science Ally, okay? Any other is not our handle. At Science Ally, the hashtag is Climate Action Zone. So even if you just go on your social and go to that hashtag, you'll find information about what is happening, what conversation is happening where, and you'll be able to plug, okay? Great, so I'll need to release you guys. I think there might be coffee. Yes, there is lots and lots of coffee and tea and everything nice. So take the time to converse and connect. Have a good day. See you tomorrow. Sorry. And I cannot leave without thanking Selena. She's been brilliant. Thank you so much for using your gift. Asante sana. Great.